first of all, thank you everyone for attending the webinar, Adaptive Supply Chains for the Healthcare Industry. Really appreciate being here today and having our guests from across, the healthcare industry to share their story with us. Just a few housekeeping rules before I pass it on. Everybody is on listen only mode. We're going to be using the questions and or the chat function to ask questions throughout the presentation. There will be a Q&A section at the end, so we will be addressing all of the questions at the end of the presentation. We also will be recording the event, and we will be circulating it to everybody who is on the call. So we should have that circulated by the end of the day today. So with that being said, I will pass it over to Bernard. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Melissa, for the introduction. I'm Bernard Milian. I'm the head of demand-driven technologies for Europe, and you may hear that I don't have a native American or English accent. I'm having kind of a French accent, and most of the guys you will hear today will have a similar accent because that's really a French industry, I guess, community or French-speaking team we have today. So we'll go through various feedback and case studies for demand-driven implementations within the healthcare and biotech industry. And really, I would like to thank our speakers today. From Didactic, unfortunately, who couldn't join, so I will cover for them. But we'll hear from Macopharma, we'll hear from Stem Cell, we'll hear from Antogir and Stroman, and I hope you will find a lot of interest in these in their feedback. First of all, I would like to introduce the topic of what is particular in the healthcare industry and what particular challenges the healthcare industry is facing. Well, before we go there, I have just a slide to introduce demand-driven technologies for the ones of you that do not know us. We are the world leader of demand-driven MRP solutions or demand-driven software solutions. The company has been established in 2011, and we have more than 100 or even 120 or 130 customers on the leading edge of demand-driven rollouts all over the world. What is specific to the healthcare industry? Well, typically this is an industry that must absolutely be able to ensure supply continuity to its customers, but is facing a number of challenges regarding how to respond to changing demands and how to be agile for a number of reasons. The first reason is that in most of these industries, the supply chains are quite long and complex, and you will get some illustrations of that with the speakers we'll hear from today. The second thing is that, of course, as in many other industries, there's been over the years pressure on costs that sometimes were preventing from really building an agile supply chain. This is an industry as well where there are a lot of constraints, and that's for the better because as we all want the healthcare delivery to be safe. This requires stringent quality constraints, regulatory constraints, and of course, in a manufacturing environment and distribution environment, that adds a number of complexities. Product portfolios are more and more complex. I think Stroman will particularly introduce that with X times new products every couple of years. And of course, we've seen that particularly for the past several months when you have health crisis. you get subject to very significant swings in demand. And that is the case of the first company that will introduce its project and implementation today. And unfortunately, Jean-Baptiste wanted to join us today, but he could not at the last minute, and he asked me to tell you their story and introduce this company, Didactic. This is a company that is based northwest of France. So it is a French company created in '57. And this company is manufacturing and delivering medical devices, particularly for hospitals, but to a broader base of healthcare professionals. The company is manufacturing medical devices. Some of them are manufactured in France, particularly in the eastern region of France. There is as well all the R&D and development and qualification and tests are conducted in France, and there is as well sterilization that happens next to their main distribution center in the northwest part of France. And this is just the French portion of their supply chain, but their supply chain, you will see, is pretty extended with sources of supply in Asia and in Italy and all over the world, and rather complex flows. The type of products that are delivered by Didactic, you can see here. For instance, gloves that will be either surgical or exam gloves. You will get some medical hygiene products, mouth care, as well as infusion, injection, urology, etc. So as part of the product portfolio that Didactic is delivering to its customer base, you can find gloves, you can find gowns, you can find masks, you can find syringes, needles, and you can imagine that over the past 2 years, on all of those items, be them masks, be them syringes, now with the vaccination campaigns, be them gloves and gowns for hospitals, they've been through a very, very difficult period with a lot of swings in demand and supply chains that became way more difficult. Their incoming flows, and sorry for that, there are some words of French on this slide, but their incoming flows, a lot of them are coming from Asia with maritime containers of non-sterile goods. Then sterilization would happen in their facility, in their central operations. There will be as well some subcontracting and assembling of products in several subcontractors across Europe, and as well some products manufactured in their own plants in France. They serve multiple channels, and the starting point was that basically they didn't really have a robust, they had an ERP system, but to be honest, most of their planning and scheduling activity and procurement activity was handled through Excel. They have an ERP system they had implemented some time ago, the forecasting software, but really procurement was all based out of Excel and with a lot of knowledge that was in the head of the various buyer planners. They started the project and they elected to start the project early March 2020. So early March 2020, they made the decision to implement DDMRP with Replenishment Plus, the DDMRP compliant software we are offering. And they started that right before, they made the decision right before the first lockdown in France. So this means that they really dared to start the project in a very particular situation. They were already suffering from the lockdown in China that had occurred before then, and that had constrained their supplies on many items. Then they decided to run the project, and we ran all of the project remote. We never met in person. Plus, in the meantime, they had demand surges pretty much all over the place. Nevertheless, they've been able to implement the process, the tool, and the new size the DDMRP buffers, adjust the inventories, and design all the replenishment processes within a short period, because it was mid-March to mid-June, and they started really when they went live from June, and over time adjusted their settings so that by the end of September we all concluded that the implementation was complete and successful. Still, in the meantime, they had a lot of challenges to strive against, and you can see here that's really how their demand-driven model is designed. You see that the target inventory, which is the green bandwidth we see here, is way higher what they've been able to achieve over that time frame because of all the supply constraints they went through, which means that they really used the DDMRP logic to get a better view on the relative priorities and cope with what is the most urgent within the various product portfolio. Still, they had some items, and they do have some product ranges that were not affected by the by COVID-19. So for those, they really saw pretty significant improvements. You can see in the DDMRP logic, you see the status of the inventory, and you see how many items, for instance, for that supply stream were originally green, so basically in the right inventory ballpark, and then yellow, which meant overstock, and then blue, which meant overstock, etc. And you can see that over time the overstocks decreased quite a lot, and more items became green, which is very good, and this helped them reduce shortages on those product ranges. Still, as you may imagine, on the gloves, on the masks, on the gowns, the syringes, the needles, they've been, and they still are, in a very heated context, and as such could not really get the full benefit of the DDMRP process. It really helped them focus on the right priorities with their teams. So that was a short introduction to this first project with Didactic, and I will hand it over to Alexandre. Alexandre Moroz is the supply chain director for the transfusion activity within Macropharma, and Alexandre, you will introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bernard. So Alexandre Moroz, I'm the supply chain director for the transfusion division at Macropharma. And I'm working for Macropharma since the last 7 years. And we decided to go through DDMRP process. It was end of 2019. And I think this was the best decision that we took, because it's a really challenging project, but at the end, it's really something new, and we have to rethink our processes, our internal processes and external processes. So let's say that, as it is written there, we do have a very, very important continuity supply to do during this pandemic period, and demand driven will help us to do it. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so what is Mako Pharma? So Mako Pharma, we do have two main divisions. The first division is the most important one, representing more or less 90% of the turnover, which is the transfusion division. So we are one of the world leader for blood transfusion products. So we are doing blood collection products, blood processing, and blood safety products. So what does it mean? It means that we are able to produce the kit to collect the blood, the kit to process the blood. So it means to extract from the blood the plasma and the platelets and the red cells, for instance. And we are also able to produce equipment to be able to process the blood. Okay, so we are one of the main actor of the blood transfusion, and we do have also another, let's say, another division, which is the biotherapy. And in the biotherapy, we are it's on the right side of the slide, so it's really written very small, but we are doing the cells and tissue therapy, the regenerative medicines, and the transplantation. We are using the component of the blood to be able to help for transportation, regenerating medicines, and so on. And we do, for instance, also some cord blood process. So next slide. Bernard, yes. We have a very, very strong objective, is to put in place, we put it in place a few years ago. This is the business continuity. We have all the production sites ISO certified for the business continuity, which means for us a huge engagement since the last 4 to 5 years to deploy this process, to deploy the business continuity, because it means that we had to think how to securize, how to minimize the risk between our plants. And it means we have sometimes to copy paste the process from one plant to another to be sure to be able to keep the production running if we have one issue in one of our plants. So what does it mean for us? It means that it forced us to have a very complex supply chain. And also our complex supply chain is due to the fact that Mako Pharma is a worldwide present company. We have 18 subsidiaries around the world. We do have 50 distributors, and we have 4 production sites, 2 in France, 1 in Poland, and 1 in Tunisia. The second one in France switched from hospital division now to masks activity. So due to the pandemic situation, we restart in less than 6 weeks. We restart a mask activity that we stopped 3 years ago, and now we restart to produce roughly 120 million of masks per year. So this is now in our second plant in France. And we have also a network of 24 warehouses all over the world, because we do have to keep some safety stock for our customer in Australia, in Canada, in US, and so on. So we are producing 22 million units per year, 19 million of bags, 17 million of filters, 18 million needles. And for instance, in Tunisia, we are doing 5 million of assembly operation per week, just for preparing some sub-assembly. One of the key topics why we decided to go to DDMRP is, of course, to have a more reliable figures, more reliable supply chain, but it was also to work on our inventory, because at the end of 2019, we had more than 200 days of inventory. And as it is very common for supply chain, we have a huge inventory, but we have a poor OTIF to our customer, poor. We were around 89, 90% by the end of 2019. So we decided to go to DDMRP in order to integrate into DDMRP our global supply chain. We have 3 production sites, which are all integrated and all customer and supplier relations. What does it mean? It means that one plant will be the customer and the supplier for the other. And as I explained you, we do have a business continuity requirement, which force us to duplicate many processes. So we have doubled the production place, but at the end we have double, even triple the delivery, the relation with the suppliers and so on. And the last point that we all live together, this is that we have GDP, GMP, we have a lot of regulatory constraints. So next slide, Bernard. Another point, very important, as you understood, we do have a complicated supply chain, not complicated due to the, it's complicated due to the fact that for one kit, this is one standard kit, you can have a sub-component coming from Tunisia, coming from Poland, coming from France, or even sometimes coming from supplier, because for the business continuity, we had to do double sourcing on the key component of our product. So this is very important for us to be agile, and this is a very big challenge for us due to the fact that, as I told you, we do have business and regulatory constraints, but also we have, for some products, very, very long supply chain and very, very long lead time. So here we put one example that we do have more than 240 days of cumulative lead time from the raw material to the finished good assembly. So our target was to put in place demand-driven, to cover the lack of agility, to cover the lack of flexibility of our ERP. We had the same issue as Didactic. It means that in every plant, we were having thousands of Excel files to run the production, to run the supply. Even if the ERP system was able to tell us what to order in terms of volume, we didn't have so many possibility than to go to Excel to do it at the mix. We have also 6 weeks frozen in our production, and we had to put in place buffers all over the supply chain to reduce the frozen time. Our target is to go from 6 to 2 weeks frozen. Also another target that we do have with the fact that with AirPlus and with the DDMRP process, we want to empower the production site to give more autonomy, and of course to put in place buffers, decoupling points, and to be able to be agile. Okay, how did we do that? We decided to go for DDMRP. It was end 2019, beginning of 2020. We had the first meeting with Bernard and the first training 11th to 13th of March. And the 17th of March, the French government decided that we have all to be in lockdown. So it means that since 17th of March, we met only Bernard by remote and only through the computer. So it was, let's say, very, challenging for us to put in place the system on a remote exercise, because we had to integrate Poland, Tunisia, and France. As you can see, we are now at the last part of the model, because we are now in the model improvements. We are trying to reduce the lead time. We are also putting in place all the KPIs follow-up. We are doing also now, even in Tunisia, they start to do a monthly review, and they do their KPIs with the AirPlus systems. And now we are already in the changing mode. So it means, as I explained you at the beginning, we had to, let's say, put a new process and a new system, not a new system, but we had to review and to rework our system, roles and responsibility, due to the fact that with this, with DDMRP, we were able to give more autonomy to plants. So the target is really to reduce the frozen periods. So what did we do? We put the buffer stock on the most important components for raw material and semi-finished goods. As I explained you, we do have production in France for Poland and Tunisia, production in Tunisia for France and Poland, and so on. So we put buffers all over the supply chain to reduce the frozen production time, but also to reduce the delivery to our customer. Currently, on average, we have a delay to answer to a customer. When we do make to order, it's 3 months. Our target is also to reduce this lead time by a few weeks. Let's say at least 4 weeks lower than we do for the moment. And what is really helpful for us with the DDMRP, it is that now we are able to prioritize and to launch productions and deliver to the last minute to our plants. So it means that in the past, we had always to say, okay, this reference can be used in France, in Poland and Tunisia. I don't have to send too much in Tunisia because maybe I will put in shortage Poland and so on. So now it's not the case anymore. Now we have a very simple tool, which is helping us to deliver the right quantity, the most important quantity at the right time to Poland. And then we decide to deliver later to Tunisia if we have to. So it means it's much more easier for my scheduler and my guys in charge of transfer of goods to be able to load the trucks at the right time with the right quantity. So as you can see on the screen, it's very easy to read. What we start also end of 2020 and that we are still working on, it's also to improve our S&OP process, because since a few years we are having an S&OP process based on Excel. And of course, the most important for us now is to go through S&OP from demand driven, because when we have AirPlus, we are able to have a better vision on the future. So our target is really to put in place S&OP demand driven. The first results. So the first results are really, let's say, encouraging and positive, because as I told you, we are now since a few months managing our stocks with a much more visible, with a better visibility. It's really easy for us to look at how the stock is behaving. Do we reduce? Do we have too much stock? Do we have risk? And so on and so on. So the visibility is really enhanced. We have a better collaboration across our multiple sites. We do have a better view on priorities, and we start to reduce our stock of component and semi-finished products. We start already to reduce the fixed horizon and the frozen horizon for the production by, okay, it's not that much for the moment, but we are on the way to improve it. It's roughly one week and a half when we do have the target to go to 4, but we are on the way to do it. And what is the most important for me as a supply chain director, it is that I am much more confident on the inventory control that we are going to have. So it's very easy for me to have a view on what's going on the multiple sites, and of course around the 24 warehouses we have around the world.
Thank you very much.
I was a little bit too long, maybe.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Alexandre, for your testimony. And so, if you have questions, please enter them in the question section of GoToWebinar, and we'll take the questions at the end of this conference. And now I will go to Antogier and Stroman. So Peter, Francois, and Eric will introduce themselves and tell us about what is Stroman and what was the demand-driven transformation about. Peter, I think you start first. Peter, we cannot hear you. You're on mute. All right. Let me see. For some reason I cannot get you. All right. I think you're muted on your end. Can you try to unmute, Peter? Hello?
You're unmuted. Unmuted?
Now it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much, Bernard, for the introduction. So, to give you a brief overview, I am within Straumann representing the corporate supply chain. So, what we are doing, we support the group with the planning of the global demand, giving the right signals to the manufacturing sites. At the same time, we do apply the warehouse service here in Basel and then distribute it to the various sites. As we see here, we serve around about 50 distributor centers around the globe. Beside that, also some distributors which we just take as a customer. And we do all the exportation towards these countries, and we apply the inventory management in those various locations with the best practice. So as you can see here, we are quite advanced when it comes to the footprint of the dental implantology. However, for the supply chain methods, we still have to learn, and that's why we wanted to implement the demand-driven approach as we more and more reached the limits of our capabilities so far. So therefore, we wanted to go for new approaches, and I think we would be in the middle, or we would assess ourselves a bit in the middle where we are. So we progress, but we still have to learn. So having said that, you could go to the next slide, Bernard, where we can show you a bit more of the details where we are. So from the growth aspiration, as we see in the top line, we would like to grow significantly up to a certain limit. So we gave us the target with 5 billion, where you can see further down, we in the year of 2019 had around about 1.2. So this is then the level what we would like to achieve on top of that. So with all this said, you see the delta from 2013 to 2019, what we went through already. The biggest challenge was the increase of the SKUs, where we currently have 16,000 global SKUs. However, there are many more which are then not directly impacted, but contribute to the complexity. And therefore, we just had to handle, as this growth was so significant, that we had to handle and then accepted to take this journey. What we see on the right side, as we don't see the VUCA only as a threat with a volatility and so on, so we more see it with a chance of saying, what can we learn and what can we do, and where the challenge is, we would like to go further. So therefore, we are in the middle to learn and do so. And therefore, we tried to go beyond this normal approach with the MRP and went slightly into this more demand-driven, what we see in the very bottom, which is then into the adaptive S&OP, and towards this direction we are right now. So when we go into the next slide, here we can see that for good reason we implemented the MRP, which is classically embedded into the SAP landscape. However, this reached certain limits, as there was a kind of a battle going back and forth, that the forecasting was never good enough and the capacity was never sufficient and the prioritization were not that clear. So that's why we just struggled a bit, and we were a bit victims of ourselves, that the growth was just so strong and we could not react with our processes and have the right priorities giving to the manufacturing side. in all fairness, we would have to say all over capacity would have met. However, we were not able to give the right signals or early enough to launch the right quantities and the right products, because we simply did not have this transparency as we saw in this classical MRP approach. So that's why we struggled, as we see here in the bullet 3, to have the right priorities, because it was very difficult to have, okay, is it the priority from today, or is it still the priority from yesterday? And maybe in the afternoon there was a new list available. So all in all, we had a good fight with Excel sheets, which was our planning environment. So everybody was familiar with Excel, and beyond that, everybody had its own Excel, which was great. So that's a bit like how you want to do a film. Everybody has its own playbook, and that was not really good. Therefore, we wanted to go into this approach and say, okay, where can we have the right priorities? And I think this is what we learned with implementing the DDMRP, which just gives us the right priorities, knowing there are limitations of capacity, knowing that there are limitations of delays, which you just not can overcome with a shortcut. Because if it takes 30 days, it will take 30 days. You cannot accelerate it if not possible. However, the priorities, they can be made very clear. So with that, if you would go to the next, we could say, yes, we went on a journey. However, our colleagues from Ontogir started earlier. And if, okay, I would like to hand over to Francois, who can guide us a bit with the experience from our Ontogir colleagues who did the journey and the experience earlier than we did.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be with you today. And I'm François Ravet, in charge of the planification, supply chain and distribution for the Ontogir brand. Today, Ontogir is in the same business as Straumann, and today we are part of the Straumann group as a brand within the Straumann brand portfolio. And at the time where we implemented the project, it was an early implementation in 2018. We had a 6-month project. It has been 2 years since I knew Straumann, and I met Peter, I met Eric, and they were thinking about all these alternatives, methods to DDMRP2, and we were already discussing DDMRP, and we had the chance to gather and to think together about that, and that's why at one point Ontogir was still independent. We had the opportunity in Ontogir to decide to go for the DDMRP. So it went very quick afterwards. We had a tremendous first success with the methodology, and as you can see, we joined the group in a year after, roughly, and since Straumann itself started with the DDMRP, and we are all joining our effort now to build a better system within the group and with the knowledge of each site. And we are still dedicated site, but I can see that in the future we will be able to have a similar approach than Mako Pharma, because we are manufacturing basically the same parts, and I think one of the new opportunity of the DDMRP will be to intricate a little bit more the site and to be able to manage some load balancing. Maybe we can go on the next slide. So basically, I will be very quick on this one because it's very classic. We are all doing that when we are thinking of the first step of the project. We have a very classic approach between a first machining step and a quick finishing step in our production in our plants. So we naturally decouple and we bufferize the flow, the manufacturing flow between machining and finishing, and we redecouple it with at the hub level. And part of the next step that we envision and we are discussing within the group is we have in the whole world subsidiaries which are stocking our products, and we are thinking about also installing the buffers at the subs level, which is not live yet. Next step, Bernard. Next slide, please.
You should see
Bernard.
it now.
Maybe. Thank you. I can see.
Okay.
So the design model globally is the following: is that we have a very strong growth, double-digit growth. Manufacturing capacity is structurally stretched. Although we add constantly in the group new facilities, it has been quite a concern to meet a good customer service level. And obviously it was driven our decision. Despite this overload, many items are overstock, as you can imagine. As Peter was mentioning, now we should have even more SKUs to manage, more than 20,000, I guess, at the time. By decoupling the flow, pulling the inventory upstream and adjusting batch sizes, the target was to build more agility and balance inventory. It's a very important point here because, again, agility, what does it mean behind? It means to maintain our capacity to prioritize and to put the resource when it is needed. And when it is needed, it is at the time that the customer wants it, and not the plant manager or the supply manager. It's the customer that should govern the priorities. And due to the, I would say, the force and the advantage of the DDMRP methodology, this is really was a key gain in all the DDMRP implementation. Very quickly to hand over, the finished goods inventory formally managed through MRP has been able to be managed between the plant and the hub in a VMI mode, of course, and as a result, the finished good inventory are decreasing while the semi-finish has increased to build up the buffers and to give the full capacity of the model. So on that, I will hand over to Eric.
Okay, thank you, François. So hello everyone. I'm Eric Fontel, in charge of the plant in Switzerland. We have almost more than 700 people. Like François said, so we changed also the concept, role and responsibility between the plant and the global distribution center in Basel. And this was based on VMI concept. We, in the past, our colleagues placed some replenishment order, and now we are in charge to replenish clearly what they need. And in fact, the purpose of that was, and the goal was to decrease the stock of finished product in Basel and put in place clearly a decoupled stock and buffers in the plant on the semi-finished product. And this is what you can see on the graphics, a constant decrease of the stock. In parallel, we had also an amazing second half of the year, last year, with record after record of the new sales that we was in place. And we imagine that at the beginning of this year, it was more quiet and it was on the same speed. And we had a new record again. And this was clearly a change because we were truly responsible to fulfill the stock of our colleagues in distribution in Basel. And at least last year, funny things, we had to stop with the COVID the plant, and we use this opportunity to increase semi-finished stock and to use the capacity. Yes, you can switch the slide, please, Bernard. And the point here, we saw that we have some decrease of the excess of inventory. That means based on the bell curve to have clearly the right stock where you need, not too much and not less. And this is a point. And based on that also, we have to face at least some gap between what could be what we imagine in terms of demand and clearly the true demand. And this is clearly what François said. The signal from the customer is clearly what we need, and this is a powerful effect of to use R+. And based on that, we have also the ability to use some prevision about what could be the forecast of the evolution of the supply for the future. And this is also some tools that we use now in R+ with our colleagues from Basel to have some vision about how we'll be able to supply or not according to the right priority for the future. Can switch, Bernard. Soft result based on that is clearly to truly really manage the right priority based on the COVID effect. We had clearly a breakdown on the demand in April and May last year, and a big bounce back on the right moment when we started go live the R+, and it was just amazing in few weeks how we were able already to use the right priority and manage our limits of capacity because the bounce back was so high on the market, but it was really nice. Also to have an alignment and trust in terms of collaboration between all teams, between this production site and distribution with the team of Peter, and we grow together. We learn a lot. We did a lot of loops of optimization regarding buffers and everything behind. And we had also some nice exchange with François because they had more experience than us, according to the fact that they use that R+ since 2 years before us. And based on that, we had some huge increase of visibility and agility regarding the bounce back last year. And also, we changed also the rules and also the responsibility of the people, reduce the firefighting exercise, and focus on the right priority, talk the same languages, has full transparency between the different players of the supply chain. And this clearly pushes us to think about use sometimes mistakes to improve and to learn all together. Next step will be clearly to focus on DDOM model clearly, and focus also on for the future on buffers for capacities and limited control points. And this is where we have a constant and continuous improvement learnings together and see how we can evolve on the model. And like Peter said also, now we are also working on S&OP, DD S&OP also to have more long view on the business and process in terms of capacity management for the future. Next.
Thank you very much, Peter, Eric, and François. We're running a bit behind schedule, so we'll hand it over to Geoffrey. Geoffrey will tell us the story of stem cell. I think stem cell is clearly the most mature implementation. Geoffrey, you will tell us when you got started, got this journey started.
Sure. Okay. I can start and I can try to catch up for the time that we lost earlier. I'm Geoffrey, managing planning and inventory strategies at Stem Cell. And yeah, I guess we can go to the next slide and quickly talk of a company and then move to demand driven. So Stem Cell, our current CEO is our founder, Dr. Alan Eves. And the fact that he's a doctor and the fact that he's driven by science is helping us making quick decisions that we don't have to report to a board of finance people. So it's really helping the company, and it's helping us staying focused on science and research so that we can put any money that we make back into R&D. And that's how we're planning for long-term growth. And so what is Stem Cell doing? We're trying to cover all the needs of the labs around cultivating medias and cultivating cells, separating cells between each others, providing the primary cells for the persons that are looking for it, and also giving the instruments that are needed to make all of these operations in the lab. And so here we can see that Stem Cell is a global company now having a presence in North America, Europe, and Asia. And so because we'll see after that, because our company grew that much, we had more and more distribution centers, and we had to get, we needed to have a stronger supply chain and systems, and that's one of the reasons why we moved to demand driven. So that's what we can see now. Moving to the next slide. So the main constraints at Stem Cell, that the luckiest one of all, I guess we were having a 20% growth year to year for the past 20 years. And so it was hard to keep up with the growth if you just have MRP and standing min-max that you guys are refreshing like every 6 months for 12 months. Plus, on top of it, we were, I guess, growing the portfolio a lot. And so launching so many products with static values and static min-max was out of the questions. And as I said earlier, we were also having more and more distribution centers getting in multiple countries. And so, yeah, the idea of stock became more and more important. So now that we're seeing our supply chain model, I can tell you that we started DDMRP in 2014, but when we chose Air Plus. And so the first idea was really, if we go to the next slide, to start securing everything that was external. So we started with all the raw materials and making sure that we had an hybrid model where raw materials, and now we can see distribution centers running with DDMRP, controlling all the external components of our supply chain. And then when it was done, if we go to the next slide, we'll see that we also, the last step for us was really to explode all of these bill of materials and focus on also scheduling and manufacturing. After doing this, after a year or two, we found, I guess, the limit of DDMRP and or Air Plus for our company and our model. The biggest one was how to deal with expiring product. Like you can be at top of green one day, and the next day, if you're scrapping everything or if everything becomes expire or unable to sell, you're suddenly at zero. So you need to have all the triggers long enough in advance for you to plan and have a fresh lot before scrapping the old one. So we had to build tools in the interface between our ERP and Air Plus to model this. We were also talking about S&OP, but we were missing something that was really short term, meaning like, oh, for example, what's going to hit us in May or what's going to hit us in June. And so we integrated AirPlus and our CRM software together to look at what are the big things that are spiky that we need to plan in advance. And last, because we have, I guess, same as someone earlier, like we are close to having 20,000 products. We had so many alerts that we had to create BI tools to help us prioritizing all the alerts between themselves and know what to do first. So a few stats, I guess if you guys want to compare yourselves with us to see what do we do, we have almost 3,000 raw materials now, 1,500 semi-finished, and more than 4,000 finished goods. And because we have multiple AirPlus instances in multiple countries, that's giving us 60,000 part location combination that we have to manage and that we're refreshing every like 3 or 4 times a day. After doing this, like we were really, really stable, but we figured out that something was lacking in the way that we were planning demand driven, but manufacturing and QC and QA, they were still working the MRP way with due dates. And so we were not aligned with the way we're working. So we went back to DD Tech again and we integrated DBR Plus to have a complete, I guess, suits of softwares and to be demand driven all the way. And so this is the story of how we implemented DBR. So first, we had to define our operating model. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that here it's just a simple example where we don't have too many operation. And so the idea is that first we had to define the routines and operations of that for every products of the company and identify all the resources and their respectful capacity. And if we go to the next one, we had to go back to, I guess, theory of constraint, find what was the constraints and make sure that we were now placing time buffers instead of stock buffers in front of them to make sure that our constraints or drum is running all the time, because a minute lost at the constraint is a minute that you cannot have back, while the other resources have some sprint capacity. After that, we can see that inside DBR, these are DBR screenshots, we place some time buffers before some key resources, constraints or not, to make sure that they always had a small pile of work in front of them to make sure that the constraints always running. And after having this, we can see that now our schedulers are demand driven as well. All the priorities are coming from AirPlus directly because DBR Plus and AirPlus are, if I may, talking to each other. And so this is really helping us prioritize the work for everyone with a similar vocabulary. And here for us manager, we can see that we can look at all our resources and see where do we need to shift people, where do we need to plan for overtime, temps, etc., to see where are we backlog and where do we have some extra room. And last, I guess this is our model before. Like we were really working in silos with different things, like planning was looking at AirPlus, manufacturing was looking at due dates, QC was waiting for emails to know what to do first. So it wasn't really working and it was very heavy maintenance for poor results. And so we can see that now on the next slides, we have these daily buffer meetings where we're going to have some representative of each group. So we're going to have some planning people, manufacturing people, QC and QA. And this is a spreadsheet that is fed by DBR Plus, where we can see how many work orders do we have for each resources, how many of them are late, how many hours do we have that are past due, and that's how quickly every day, in maybe just 5 to 10 minutes, we'll quickly be able to talk all together within operation, make decisions about, oh, do we shift people? Do we bring people on the weekend? Do we ask for a temp? Do we push some stuff? And so that's really helping us staying aligned. And last really is doing S&OP with a demand-driven method. And so the idea is that now we're using the best available forecast that we have coming from sales or marketing. So ideally we have something for a product. Sometimes we have something about a product line that's okay. And sometimes we just have something saying, oh, like we think we're going to do 100 million next month or next quarter, and we'll have to take it. And so what we'll have to do, depending on the type of forecast that we'll have, is that we'll scale our ADU for every part when needed. We'll run the advanced planning module in AirPlus now to see when every finished goods will be ordered and how much of them. And all of these work orders that are recommended by APM, we can either play with them in the APM if we have all our manufacturing routines loaded. And if we don't, we can load them in DBR, run everything and see where it breaks. It's like, oh, in 6 months, we need someone in labeling. In 2 months, we need an equipment in QC. And so this will really help us do our capacity planning and also our budget to know when do we need to hire people, where do we need equipments. And so the main outcome of these S&OPs is that we're reviewing these results and we're doing some sensitivity analysis to try and load some scenarios, and then we'll have some results. And last, I guess the latest new thing at Stem Cell is that now that we're stable on all of these demand-driven processes, we created a new department that we call Supply Chain Analytics, where we're able to segment the business unit by portfolio or business unit and look with some demand-driven model plus inventory strategies that are active behind. So like, okay, how much should we have? Where should we have it? What's the situation today? How much do we sell, stock, scrap? And so that's really helping us doing some audit of our systems and driving improvements. And so if we want to talk about results, in our first 2 or 3 years, I think with demand driven, we moved on-time delivery from 90 to 95%, while decreasing our inventory value by 15, 16%. Now there's an inventory valuation that is actually understood by the execs and documented. So now we can explain like, oh, if I have 50 million in stock or 100 million in stock, is it a good news or bad news? Is it at the right place? Is it with the right products? We had a really big decrease in write-offs. So we are scrapping less and less, which is amazing. And we really feel that we have more flexibility and control of our system. And so if we go to the next slide, that's something we'll see. Because I guess talking about flexibility, we really had to be flexible in the past year, mainly with COVID, where we had very different impacts depending on the countries. Some of them were on lockdown, some of them were not. And also some product line really took off surprisingly, and some product line were slow. And so instead of having some blank adjustment factors or blank cancel shipments, we were able to move the needle as we wanted to target everything, to target exactly the countries or product lines that we wanted to make sure that we were reacting to sales and we were proactive. And also Brexit, like it took us 2 days from on the planning and stock point of view to build a distribution center and be ready for it, to say, okay, which part do we need to stock? How much, how many days of use will this cover? And so now we know that technically, if we were creating Stem Cell Brazil tomorrow, from the planning point of view, we're able to do all these adjustments fairly quickly and fairly accurately. And if I remember correctly, I think I'm good.
Yeah, thank you very much, Geoffrey. You will have plenty of questions, I'm sure. Well, thank you all for your experience sharing, and we do have some questions. So I will try and answer some, and I will hand over the questions to you guys. So I will answer this first one. Will the webinar be available? Will there be a replay available after this live event? Yes, there will be a replay available after this live event, and you will receive the link to the replay. Question from Norbert. Are the basic supply chain monthly governance, S&OP, supply demand meeting, regarding those monthly governance processes, is it different when we are running DDMRP? And if yes, what are the major differences? Who wants to take the question? Geoffrey, would you like to answer this one?
Sorry, can you just maybe repeat the question?
How is the monthly S&OP process changing when you're implementing DDMRP, and how does it differ from regular supply demand balancing in an MRP environment?
Okay. We found that I don't really like this, but if we were to measure forecast accuracy, we would be better because it's more data driven. Since we have all our manufacturing routings that are clear in the system, that we have a very clear knowledge of our seasonality with PAFs, our historical usage, and we can do this at the product or product line level, we found ourselves to be more precise. And I think that's the main difference. And I guess we're also quicker at building these plans now, as we don't have 5 or 10 Excel files to refresh and then merge all of them back together. So the data is more centralized and maybe more accurate.
Yeah, maybe I would add something to the S&OP process when it comes to the demand-driven. Instead of having an S&OP process that will translate into an NPS, in fact, what the S&OP process guides is how to adjust the buffers over time. We are not really generating an NPS, we are generating buffer adjustments that would be adjustments, for instance, of the yellow zone to plan for some pre-build before a plant shutdown, for instance, or before a spike of demand. And typically this is really less deterministic because you're sizing your buffers, you're sizing your capabilities, but at the end of the day, you will replenish based on actual consumption or actual orders. And most likely as well, the S&OP process is more focused on adaptation, change management, than on trying to find a supply-demand balance that is not always available or possible. Any other remark on S&OP? And Alexandre, I know your team is currently working hard on this topic and still adjusting, the processes.
Yeah, I think we are not mature enough on the S&OP with AirPlus, but we are trying to. Yeah, as you explained, we are trying really to show during our S&OP presentation what are the main priorities and what do we have to adjust in terms of on buffers, and we try to anticipate the summer shutdown. We try to explain in a different words, not anymore in terms of global capacity or global needs. We are trying to show as you explained, what are the buffers that we have to fill and when do we have to start to fill them. So this is a little bit different than a normal global capacity review.
Okay, a question from Pedro for you, Alexandre. So Pedro tells us, bonjour, my question is for Mr. Moroz. I'd like to know if you have neutral components in your inventory, like flacons, tubes, bags, filters, whatever. And if this is the case, how do you buffer them? This kind of components, at what point in your supply chain did you change or do you apply a different supply strategy for those neutral components?
I'm not sure to understand what is neutral component.
I guess, for instance, tubes that can be used in plenty of different
products. Yeah, I know what you mean. A component which can be used in the assembly of many. Yeah.
Many assemblies.
So how can I answer that? Yeah, I think yes, we put buffers in every plant which are using the component, and we try to analyze of course the demand. We try to analyze the flow. It means how many days do we have between each plants, how many days of transports, what are the risks, do we have risk of delays, do we have also double sourcing, because for some neutral component, as you said, we could have also external supplier. We have internal and external suppliers. So how did we do that? I think that yeah, I think we
maybe I'll help you.
You can answer to this
on this one as well. A couple of examples, because in fact I think you have many common items. So items that will go into multiple assemblies. And one of the things that has formally been done during the design and implementation is that when an item was, for instance, used in 3 plants, typically on the manufacturing side for this item or on the sourcing side for this item, there is a central buffer, and the buffers that are spread to the downstream operations are just taking into account the transportation frequency between sites, and there is definitely a buffer that has been implemented and secured at the source. Maybe that's kind of answering as well a portion of the question from Pedro. Tricky question from stem cell Geoffrey. I think you mentioned, Geoffrey, that you're refreshing 3 to 4 times a day. R plus or DBR plus, it wasn't sure what is the main reason behind 3 times a day updates.
The main reason is just to make sure that every time we firm our orders in R plus to create all the pending orders, we also need to have a refresh to bring them back to our ERP. So we try to do this every 4 hours. So at least our planners or buyers, they have, like, in the afternoon, they have all the purchase requisitions or work orders that they approved in the morning. So yeah, they need to have this at least once every half days. And DBR plus, we're only doing this once a day.
Okay, thank you very much, Geoffrey. Question to all project teams: what portion of the project was process change, and what portion was tool change? Maybe a question for Eric.
I think in terms of change management, it was clearly a big deal regarding the fact that they will have to forget the MRP calculation at least, and trust clearly R plus system and priority management. And at the beginning, it was just changing for the people because they just continued to make a comparison between the result from the MRP calculation from SAP and the result of the calculation from R plus. But very soon, they started to switch and then to behave completely differently. But most important thing is that you have to allow people to make mistakes, because we will have to adjust a few times some buffers and parameters, and sometimes we have to learn from mistakes, and it was just also important for the people to be able to make some mistakes and not blaming people about error and mistakes. But clearly, I think it was easy for the tools management to move to R plus, because they say it was just a nightmare to use our MRP and Excel file behind, and but clearly to onboard also people from production to say, now you have to follow the recommendation from R+ and not anymore from the ERP system. And clearly it was a big part of the change management behind, I will say.
Other remarks regarding change management versus technical aspects?
Well, the only remark I would make is that it's, let's say, as much as so it's a 50-50 answer. However, where we have to put much efforts because it's more difficult. It's the change management because it's more difficult to make people change rather than applying just the model or the tool methodology.
And if I can add something, it's clearly the job of the people will evolve. And this is something that we have to take care step by step, according to the level of maturity that we will gain on the time.
And that you surfaced an important point, Eric, which is to allow for mistakes and uncertainty throughout the project. And I can remember, and that was an issue at the beginning of the project at Macropharma, Alexandre, is that the team was willing to get everything defined very precisely. What will be my role within 3 months after we roll out? What am I going to do A to Z? And in fact, reality is that you build these as you implement the model, and you co-build the model with the team, and then things clarify, and then you make decisions, and then you make adjustments, and in the meantime you have some trial and error.
Right? Yeah, this is what I wanted to say. It is that in fact for my team, the usage of the tool was at the end when you understood the process, when you understood what DDMRP means. The usage of the tool is very easy because it's very, let's say, easy to read, easy to understand, and so on. So now we are in a phase where you have to be ready to go step by step and to help the people to adapt on let's say even on the daily basis, because we start with some ideas, we change the ideas, we make one step forward, one step behind, and really the most difficult was not the implementation of the tool. Definitely, the most difficult is to help the people to understand their future roles and to go step by step with them, and don't want to. You don't want to change everything in one shot. It must be step by step, and it's really for us. It was not the tool. The tool was easy to install. Yeah, so this is much more change management, which is much more difficult to go.
Okay, next question from Nick. Geoffrey mentioned connecting Salesforce or the CRM to see promo demand. Were there any other places where you have had to make changes to get DDMRP to work in your particular environment and context?
I guess this wasn't related to DDMRP, but just that when we were stable to MRP and we reached a 95% on-time delivery, we were looking at what were the last 5%, and we just figured that for a few of these persons, we knew it was coming. It's just that planning didn't know. Because for some small parts, like a quantity of 5 or 10 may not seem big, but for us it may be a spike. And because we have so many finished goods, sales doesn't know what's spiky or not spiky, part per part, location by location. And so I guess, yeah, that's not really related to demand-driven. That was just an opportunity for us to get even better on order fulfillment. So we grabbed this opportunity, and since I guess R+ helped us, because since R+ is just a black box where we can load pretty much anything we want, that was easy for us to export something from Salesforce, create a CSV demand file, and load this in an R+ sandbox and play with it. So that was a project outside demand driven, but the fact that we had AirPlus make it easy to implement.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. Question from Jordan. What are your recommendations for a company considering a DDMRP transformation? What worked well for you and what did not? Well, that's a broad question. Who wants to go first?
If I may
try to.
Yeah, Peter.
Well, the challenge is there are many rights and there are many wrongs. So I think we need to admit that there are many opinions and we need to learn. That's really the question. What is for me the main takeout? How to take the best opinions and try to put this together. I give you an example. We used to work with forecasts which were always wrong. We used to take history data, which was not good enough. So what we can take is the blend approach where the DDMRP allows us to blend or to put together forecast and history data because you need both. You need to have a share which is history proven, which is okay, but the trend looking forward, you don't see. However, you need an indication. And this is a good model where we had to come close together because both were right and both were wrong. But with a mixed approach, you can go forward. That's an example.
Okay. Other recommendations for a company that would be considering?
For me, if I may, let's say, redo something on the project, I think that I will maybe have one or two people dedicated to the project, at least at the beginning, to go really deeper into the process definitions and the, let's say, what is really needed, what is not really needed, and so on. So if I could give a good advice is really to have 1 or 2% dedicated at least during 3 to 6 months on this project to lead and to lead the deployment afterwards. When you have, it's really depending if you have only one site to deploy or many sites as we had, because at the end you can have some people in your team doing operationals, then jumping to AirPlus project, going back to management of the COVID-19 crisis and so on. I can tell you it was really difficult to have, let's say, a continuous, a continuous improvement on this. And I think really if you have the opportunity to have, let's say, some people dedicated to the project, it will help really to go faster.
Okay. Question for an expert of the S&OP and DDS&OP process. So this is a question from Alexander. Do any of your companies run parallel or distinct S&OP processes for non-buffered items and DDS&OP for buffered items, or do you do it all at once?
For stem cell, we do it all at once.
Macropharma as well.
Yep. Yeah, we do it all at once, of course. Yeah.
So the tools and the processes are designed to be able to combine both. Question from Norbert. Is it more difficult to place buffer stock at different levels in the supply chain when you are working with third-party suppliers? How do you convince them without bringing additional cost for the importing company? So I don't know if any of you implemented buffers at suppliers as part of your projects. I don't think that was the case, and I think that's what Norbert is surfacing here. Okay, I think we went through the list of questions. If there are any additional questions, just go ahead and ask in the. I'm not seeing any additional question, and I think we're at the end of the time slot we had scheduled for this call. So I would like to thank you all for your your testimonies and the rich discussion. And wish you all to continue your journey in a very successful way in this wonderful demand-driven world. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye-bye.